Welcome to Razón de Estado. I have the privilege of introducing Mr. George Piro, a special agent in charge of the FBI's Miami field office. Mr. Piro has a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in criminal justice. He served as Deputy Director of the International Operations Division at the FBI headquarters, and this is his second term as a special agent in charge of the Miami field office. From that office, Mr. Piro has direct contact, information, and relation with what happens in Latin America. Mr. Piro has held various investigative, operational, and management positions within the FBI. He is an expert on international terrorism, counterterrorism, and anti-drug trafficking. In 2003, Mr. Piro was the team leader responsible for the interrogation of Saddam Hussein and other key figures in the old Iraqi regime. Among the many awards for intelligence and law enforcement services, Mr. Piro has received the National Intelligence Achievement Medal, the FBI Director's Award for Excellence, and the FBI Medal for Meritorious Achievement. Mr. Piro, welcome to Razón de Estado. Thank you for giving us a few minutes. When the FBI or other law enforcement agencies conduct operations in third countries, partially, you rely on collaboration with local police, the Army, and the justice system. How does the U.S. trust these institutions when conducting investigations around the world, for example, in the Central American Northern Triangle, when it's well known that some of their high-ranking officers in these law enforcement agencies are members, the members are corrupt and are involved in organized crime?
So the FBI is a global organization, and like any other global organization, it requires its personnel to be assigned overseas to facilitate, for example, the FBI's intelligence, investigative, and operational needs to fulfill our mission, which is to protect the American people and to defend the U.S. Constitution. So for us to effectively work internationally, we have to rely on our collaboration and partnership with our foreign counterparts. We have a long history with our foreign counterparts. We do joint trainings, we have exchange programs, we host members of the various foreign partners that we work with, and through those interactions and engagement, we determine the components that we are committed to and develop that trust that is required for us to be able to fulfill our mission. We tackle issues that are of mutual interest for the betterment of both countries, and when you do have mutual interest and when the goal at the end of the day is to protect the population that you're serving, as I mentioned, the FBI's mission is to protect the American people, and when you're committed to that, it's easy to find that common ground or that mutual interest where everyone is really invested and committed to that.
Mr. Piro, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras are in the center of public attention on these days in Washington, D.C. Drug trafficking and illegal immigration to the U.S. are getting out of control, but these countries' worst problems are corruption and lack of rule of law. Actually, these are the causes of our problems. Much of our political system is at the service of mafias and organized crime. How does the U.S. approach the process of combating corruption and the capture of states by organized crime?
So the FBI has the responsibility to investigate certain international, for lack of a better term, criminal violations such as the Foreign Corruption Practices Act, antitrust, collaboracy. So those things are that for example, in my office, we're really focused on. FCPA, especially the anti-bribery section of that, allows us to investigate individuals who are trying to corrupt government officials to gain a competitive advantage. And for example, in 2020, in collaboration with the Department of Justice, we were able to obtain nearly $8 billion in fines, both civil and criminal fines, as well as prosecute key executives that were responsible in some of the anti-bribery section of FCPA. So our goal is also to be the beacon or the model when we talk about rule of law, when we talk about independent, fair, investigative practices. The FBI, as I mentioned, is a global organization, and with our partnerships, we try to be that model for others to follow.
President Biden's administration has said that it will support the Central American countries in fighting corruption. How can and does the FBI help fight local and international corruption that affect the interest of the U.S.? What other mechanisms do the U.S. law enforcement agencies have to help fight corruption in our countries?
In addition to, as I mentioned, investigating certain crimes, we in the FBI invest quite a bit in training. As I mentioned, we are we try to be a model, but we have extensive partnerships with our foreign partners, and we conduct training throughout the world. Everything from basic investigative techniques to the more sophisticated, to money laundering, and now social media and different things like that, with the goal of elevating the capacity and the capability of our foreign counterparts so that they can take on and tackle some of the challenges that their countries is facing.
Wow. Mr. Piro, over the past years, we have seen in most of the Central American countries how the drug cartels have gained more power, have accumulated more resources with which buy impunity and are even taking control of the political system. What is your vision on how the war on drugs is progressing? Is it possible to defeat the drug cartels?
Tackling drug trafficking organizations is one of the highest priorities, not just for the FBI, but really for the interagency, as we refer to it here in the United States. So, for example, it's the FBI, one of our top priorities, the Drug Enforcement Administration, Homeland Security Investigations. We work very collaboratively, the Coast Guard, IRS. So we tackle it from a multi-layered approach to try to make it as difficult as possible for the drug trafficking organizations, and not only in shipping their drugs to the United States, but also benefiting from some of the resources in the United States. For example, our banking system, our transportation system, things like that. So we attack it at a variety of different levels. It's a very difficult task, but it's one that collectively we're all committed, because it goes back to really protecting our borders and then our community.
Okay. Transnational organized crime, terrorism, and narcotics are the main targets for U.S. security agencies. What is transnational organizational crime or organized crime as it relates to security, and why, in order to address it and to be effective, close cooperation between countries is essential?
Well, it's essential because these organizations do not recognize borders.
Okay.
As a result, a lot of these organizations, whether it's terrorist organizations or transnational organized crime organizations, they have evolved to become global organizations. As a result, it requires us to work together with not only inside the United States, but with our foreign partners to attack the problems as a global problem. So for example, as you look at terrorism, some of the terrorist organizations, whether we're talking about ISIS or Al-Qaeda, they have a presence throughout the world. They're very active on social media, they're recruiting and fundraising, things like that. So for us to be really effective, we have to attack the problem as a global problem versus going from one country to another, one state to another.
Yeah. Mr. Piro, the pandemic lockdowns suffocated both legal and illegal commerce, meaning less money for organized transnational crime groups. Others argue that organized crime organizations are resilient and may be exploiting the voids left by overwhelmed official institutions. Was the pandemic negative or positive for organized crime groups? Do they have a larger opportunity to become stronger in today's world?
Well, I think it's too early to tell on the effects of the pandemic, both from a legal and a criminal or illegal perspective. You know, as we're looking at the aftermath and the effect of the pandemic, I think we're still in the very early stages. What I will tell you is that just like a legitimate corporation or organization, you know, the criminal elements can be resilient, and they also look for opportunities to diverse and expand. Unfortunately, the pandemic did create certain opportunities for criminals to go beyond what they traditionally would focus on as opportunities were available or presented themselves. But I think it's a little early to tell.
Okay.
We evolve as law enforcement evolves to address the changes in the criminal patterns and activities of organizations. Unfortunately, criminal organizations also adapt and evolve based on not only the circumstances and the conditions, but to the law enforcement's advances.
And it's obvious that they're getting access to technology, new technology, you know, as law enforcement agencies. So yeah, it's a complicated war.
It is.
Without a doubt. Mr. Piro, as your career progressed, you had the opportunity to serve in different positions, both in the Middle East and recently in Latin America. For the U.S., what are the main concerns about security threats coming from Latin American countries?
Well, I would say, you know, what concerns the United States isn't limited to just Central America. You know, the United States is the world superpower, and it is the FBI's responsibility, among other agencies, to preserve that. Yeah. We're concerned about foreign state actors that are trying to affect or influence or economic growth, things like that. So when you talk about our national security concerns, it is exactly that. It is preserving the United States as the world superpower. So not only are we leading the world from an economic growth perspective, but also from an influence perspective. You know, the United States historically has enjoyed the ability, as we refer to it as soft power, to influence countries and regions for the betterment of those countries and regions. There are foreign state actors that want to surpass the United States as the world superpower, and it's our job to prevent that.
Not an easy job.
No, it's not.
Mr. Piro, from your long history as a prominent authority in the U.S. law enforcement system, you have experience combating international terrorism, drug trafficking, and arms trafficking. Currently, given the world geopolitical situation, what are the main threats to the U.S., to the USA national security? How do you feel about that?
So, as you mentioned, the United States faces a variety of different threats, and it's not, and it's geographically diverse. So, you're correct. The United States still faces a significant threat from international terrorism. Transnational organized crime represents a significant threat to our country. Foreign state actors represent a threat to our country, with their desire to steal our national intelligence secret, our economic secrets, research development, things like that. So all of them are prominent threats to our country, and it's very difficult for me to say one is more important than the other. They all are, and they all represent, as I mentioned, a threat. So it is our responsibility to address all of that, and as I mentioned, not only protect American people, but our interests across the world and our presence and place as the world superpower.
Yeah. Tell us about your experience as team leader in the Saddam Hussein interrogation. That not only made you a superstar in those days, you gave a very famous interview in 60 Minutes, and you know, it was a big thing, and you did a great job. You know, you were not only respectful, but responsible and effective, and And in those days, in that situation, that was not easy. Tell us something. What happened?
Well, I would disagree with the superstar comment. I don't consider myself that at all. You know, for me, it's more about the organization than my actions. Right? It was a unique and historic opportunity for the FBI. It was the first interrogation of a former head of state to be conducted by the FBI. What was really critical about that assignment was to try to answer the two key questions that brought the United States to war with Iraq. It dealt with Iraq's WMD program and its alleged relationship with Al-Qaeda. Now, the American public, and really actually the entire world, wanted those two key questions answered, and that responsibility fell on the shoulders of the FBI to answer those for the American people. So our mission was to try to determine and provide accurate, objective, factually based information, not only to our policymakers here in the United States, but more importantly to the American people. It was a very, very difficult process. It took nearly 7 months to be able to answer those questions. As you can imagine, Saddam Hussein, as a brutal dictator, one of the most brutal dictators of our modern time, was extremely difficult to interrogate. He had a very strong personality and had varying reasons not to cooperate, not only his legacy, place in history, but the potential prosecution and all of these other factors that made his lack of benefit to cooperate very, very high. So it was an extremely difficult but a very historic and unique opportunity.
Absolutely. You know, tell us about that personality that the FBI has, you know, throughout history. There are movies, series, you know, all kind of legends about, you know, the FBI and how important it has been for the world's, you know, security. How similar is reality to all the, you know, the movies and series that we see on TV, you know, about life in the FBI?
I mean, I wish I could tell you it was as good as it is portrayed in the movies and on TV. What I can tell you about the FBI, you're correct. You know, the FBI is not only a global organization, but we in the FBI are very proud and believe that the FBI is the premier agency in the world. We are the model for others to follow, and we recognize that. While we're not perfect, we do make mistakes. The one thing I could tell you, our biggest asset and what really makes us the premier agency is our unique and diversified workforce that is very, very committed to the FBI mission, which is to protect the American people and to defend the U.S. Constitution. If you look at the history of the FBI and the history of our country, the one thing that becomes very, very evident is that the one agency that has always kind of defended and supported our country, and the one agency that our country has always leaned on throughout the history of our country, it is the FBI. And as a result, the mission of the FBI is something that every single employee is committed to.
Mr. Piro, in February 2nd, in Sunrise, Florida, you had to take care of one of your responsibilities, and was to, you know, lead the operation after, you know, a horrible, violent situation. You did a great job. You know, it was all over the news throughout the world. Tell us how it ended, and were you able to apprehend the criminals?
So on February 2nd, that was a very, very dark day for the FBI, not just really the Miami field office, but the FBI as a whole. On that day, we lost two exceptional special agents, Laura Schwarzenberger and Daniel Alfin. They were killed while executing a federal search warrant. Unfortunately, the subject killed himself shortly after, and however, as you mentioned, the effect that had on the office and the organization is something that we will continue to face, you know, for a long time. We will never forget the sacrifice and the heroism that was shown by the agents that were present that day I had 4 other agents wounded during that terrible gun battle. But fortunately, I'm very happy to say that those 4 agents have recovered and are actually back to work and even more committed today than before. It illustrates the danger that the position of special agent within the FBI carries, but it is a heavy responsibility that everyone is committed to.
Yeah. Mr. Piro, to end our conversation, you've been in the field, in the first line of defense all over the world. How many times have you felt your life in danger? How close have you been to death?
As you mentioned, I've been in law enforcement 32 years.
Yeah, easy to say. Wow.
And throughout my 32-year career, I've had the privilege of serving around the world. I've done a number of combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Yeah. So it's difficult to answer that that question.
Yeah, but I'm sure it was quite a few times. Mr. Piro, thank you very much.
It's been an honor
having this conversation with you, and good luck in what's coming. Thank you very much. Thank you as well. We'll see you next time. This is Razón de Estado.